Hey all, today we're going to be talking about finger patterns. This might be totally new for some of you, but will also be review for a lot of you. By now, you've all been playing your instruments and you're all pretty familiar with the basic hand frame on your instruments. If you're a violin, it looks like this, cello will be that 1, 3, 4, and bass is just that 1, 4. But today we're going to be going a bit further with those ideas that we put into place. Today we'll be using the electric bass to explore finger patterns on violin and viola and cello bass. Let's get into it. I'm going to start by showing you the violin and viola's default hand frame, the one that we've been working with for ever. It's the one that we know. So we have D, E, F sharp, G, A. If you look, you can see that there's spaces between certain notes. You can visualize it by seeing those frets. You can see that there's a space between 3 and 4, and it's a bit hidden, but a space between 1 and 2. Right? So we have those two spaces between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It looks like this on the violin. Great, we're going to move on to our second hand frame, and we've talked about this one pretty extensively in a lot of my classes, but not all of us have learned it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that standard hand frame that we know and move our second finger back. So now you can see that there's that space between 2 and 3. Right? It sounds like this. Instead of having F sharp, we now have F natural. So we have D, E, F, G, and A. A, G, F, E, D. Not F sharp, F natural. On the violin, it looks like this. Next up, we're going to reset to our default hand position. So we have that space between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But what we're going to do is we're going to stretch our third finger up. So then it's right next to 4. So now there's a space between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, but no space between 3 and 4. See that? It sounds like this. Sounds kind of weird. It doesn't sound very normal, right? This is what it looks like and sounds like on the violin. Great, we're going to talk about one more hand frame of violin and viola. So we're going to go back, reset to our default finger pattern. So space between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. First thing we're going to do is move that second finger back. So this is like that second finger pattern that we talked about. But then we're going to do one more thing. We're going to scoot that first finger back. You can even see I have spaces between all of my fingers. This really hurts. The bass is a bit bigger. The electric bass is much bigger than the violin, so I'm reaching quite a bit here. So we have that space between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and 4. Sounds like this. A bit weird. Not quite as weird as the last one, but still pretty weird. On the violin, it looks and sounds like this. Great, we've got to now to violin world. Now we're going to dive right on into cello world. I'm going to move out of this upper register, move down here. It's a bit more comfortable, and will more accurately represent the cello. So, on cello, we've spent a bunch of time with one finger pattern, and that would be open, 1, 3, 4. You'll notice that we're not using 2 right now, just 1, 3, 4. That's our basic, very super basic hand frame. Sounds like this. And it looks like this on the cello. we're not going to cover as many finger patterns as we did on violin, but we're still going to cover quite a few. So let's start with the first most basic alteration of that default hand position. So we have open, 1, 2, 4. So instead of using 3, we're going to use 2. You could see earlier how we skipped over 2. This whole fret, this whole spot right here, you can tell there's supposed to be a note there. But we were skipping over it. Now we're using second finger there, playing that note, skipping over 3. So now there's a note there that we could play, but we're not. We're skipping it. So open, 1, 2, and 4. Here's what it looks like on the cello. Great, we're going to talk about one more hand frame. And this one's a bit different. We're going to continue using that open, 1, 2, 4, but we're going to move our first finger back. You can see that we have a whole other fret here, a whole other spot that we could have a note that we're not using. All we have to do is reach back with 1 to play that. So now there's spaces, I mean, a note that we could play, but we're not. There's a space between all of those notes. 1, 2, 4. This is what it looks like on the cello. Now, there are more finger patterns that we could talk about, but those involve going into something called extensions, which unless this video is running really short on time, I don't particularly want to delve into today because it's a very complicated subject and requires actual practice with an actual instrument. And I don't think any of my cellists have an instrument home, so going over extensions right now probably isn't going to be the most worthwhile use of our time, but we might cover it at a later date. We're going to add a couple minutes by talking about extensions. I know I said we wouldn't do it earlier and that was mostly pointless, but we're going to do it anyways because it's demanded that this video is 15 minutes or longer. So extensions are sort of just what they sound like. We are extending the reach of our hand so that we can play more notes. In this case, to add 1/2 step higher that we didn't have before. It's very similar in that it's the exact opposite of that last finger pattern we worked on, where we reach back for 1. It's very similar, but opposite, as I said. We are reaching further up. Instead of putting that space between 1 and 2 back, we are playing 1, adding a space between 1 and 2. We're putting 2 where 3 is supposed to be. And then placing 4 as normal. So that we have 1 higher note. So let's go through the notes that we have using those different finger patterns. Using that default finger pattern, we have D, E, F sharp, G, right? Using that second one with our second finger, we have D, E, F natural, G. Using that last one, D, E flat, F natural, G. Great, so those are the notes that we have. And then using the extension, we have D, E, F sharp, G sharp, F sharp, E, D. So we still have F sharp, but we're playing F sharp with our second finger. It's a very large space between 1 and 2 there, see? I have these nice tapes here, and normally those tapes we have 1 and 3, but right now it's 1 and 2. An extension, does that make sense? I know you can't actually respond to me when I say that, but just go with it. Make sure that space. Extensions are something that, as a cellist, these will annoy you and follow you around until you stop playing the cello. They are a core part of playing the cello. So it's a struggle that you have to deal with, just like with how basses have to shift for everything. Now, you're probably wondering, why do I need to do extensions? Very simply, is to play notes that you did not have before. So you probably remember we would play the D major scale in class. We would start on our D string. Now, if you've learned your C string, you know that we have another D. It's down here. One finger on our C string. Why don't we start there? Well, it's because we can't play the D major scale starting on that D without extensions. We can't get the F sharp that we need. F sharp is an extension on the C string. If we don't do the extension, we only have F natural. That gives us a D minor scale. See, that sounds sad as opposed to D major. With the extension, it's much happier. So that allows us to play that scale. And just a whole lot of other things. It opens up a lot of possibilities. It also gives us C sharp on the G string. Really, it's one of the most important skills you will learn on the cello. That should be enough time to fill the video. So thanks for sticking with me through this. All right, last and certainly not least, we're going to talk about the bass. Now, the bass is interesting when it comes to finger patterns, in that we don't have one. The bass is so big that having finger patterns wouldn't make sense. What violins play like this, just between 1 and 2 with a space, that is a whole hand. That's 1 to 4. That one step is a whole frame. So there's not really much wiggle room that we can do. We are pretty much the only options we have are going 1 to 2, or 1 to 4. That's it. Going across the strings or shifting, the only ways to get around that. So really, we just don't have finger patterns, and that's okay. Just to show it, I'll play on the big bass the difference between 1 and 2 and 1 and 4. Glad we all had so much fun learning about finger patterns and hand frames. Now you're probably wondering, hey Mr. Hayden, how do I practice this without an instrument? And I'm glad you asked, because quite frankly, it's a very good question. So what I would have you do, if you don't have an instrument at home, is to use your forearm. Some of my classes see me doing this a lot to demonstrate fingers. And just put those fingers down like you would. So for violin, we have that basic hand frame with space between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Right? Then we can move that back, so now that space has changed to between 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. And just practice putting those fingers down, making sure 1 and 2 are super close to each other, like they're best friends who never want to be apart from each other. And then you could reset, move 3 up, so you're in that third finger pattern. Right, we have that space between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and then 3 and 4 are real close. Reset, lower 2, lower 1, and now we have that last finger pattern where everything has an equal spacing between them. Just practice doing that, going in between the two, well, not the two, the many different finger patterns that we have, putting fingers down, getting that tactile practice. What you can also do is do it in the air, like that. Right, you probably see me do that a lot when I yell at you about low 2s. I go like this, low 2s, right? I'm showing you low 2s, and you can practice doing that. You could just, I don't know, when you're bored doing your math homework, instead of being bored doing your orchestra homework, just be thinking like, oh yes, all those different finger patterns. The same thing goes for cello. That 1 3 4, 1 2 4, reach back 1 2 4, go between them, practice all that. Bass 1 4 1 2. Do what you gotta do. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me and ask me. I probably will definitely not read comments on this video. You could probably get a hold of me at Google Classroom. We can figure out if you need help. I could probably help you. So let me know. As you probably saw from the caption I left in the video, this video is running short on time. I edited it all, and okay, you need to leave me alone. We're good.